In 2019, the first time capsule buried by Stumpy Sanderson and his gang of mischievous working-class boys, and which was actually an old Watney's Party 7 can, was unearthed. Then in 2023, the second time capsule, which was an old Courage Jackpot Bitter Party can, was discovered. And now, Whistling 5 Anarchic Productions, in conjunction with the 1970s Cigarette Appreciation Club and Puffer Patterson's Benevolent Fund for Aging Thespians, proudly presents Series 2 of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s stories, and the 22 stories found in that second time capsule. As narrated by Andrew Brammer. Bonjour, bon après-midi, et bonsoir. The story you are about to hear is narrated in the first person, because I, just like Stumpy, witnessed firsthand the momentous events which it describes. So, let's park up the rally chopper, dim the lava lamp, switch off that episode of Catweasel, finish up the plate of Vesta beef curry, crack open a can of Double Diamond, light up a mannequin cigar, and kick back, sit back, and listen in to the anarchic and outrageous japes, scrapes and capers of Stumpy Sanderson and his gang. For this episode, we head back to 1978 for the Punk Duff Experience. Through Stumpy's oldest brother, Stumpy and I got acquainted with Tonko, a tall, ginger-haired and bearded, roll-up smoking Led Zeppelin aficionado in an army surplus jacket, flared jeans, and battered desert boots. And Tonko had somehow secured weekly use of a local council-owned function room, for which he had obtained permission to put on a once-a-week gig night for local bands. The roster of acts he put on was a balanced mixture, with a different genre put on every week: middle of the road, funk, and heavy rock. And, somehow, Stumpy and I had persuaded him to also put on a monthly new wave and punk evening, for which we would be responsible for recommending, making initial contact with, and sometimes even booking the bands ourselves. So, Stumpy and I started off by recommending and organising shows with bands from our school, including our own band, the Snarling Ferrets, and also Ingrid and the Severed Hydra, Insanity Clause, and Bowel Movements. Unfortunately, apart from the opening night, which had been pretty well attended compared to the other shows that Tonko put on, attendances for our events were fast dwindling, and crowds were growing increasingly sparse. It didn't help that, unfortunately, our night always seemed to clash and coincide with gigs from big-name acts on at either the Queensway Hall, Friars in Aylesbury, or the Hemel Hempstead Pavilion. And it was while we were standing with an audience of just 12, watching and listening to the dismal racket from a band called Pneumatic Drill, that Tonko came over and said to us, "Hi lads, can I have a word? I'm sorry boys, but this new wave and punk night doesn't seem to be going so great. The MOR funk and rock nights always get really decent crowds, and I've got a couple of guys now wanting to put on prog rock gigs. Unless you boys can start pulling in the punters, we might have to knock your night on the head." This was a disaster, the last thing we wanted to hear, and Stumpy and I were feeling pretty down when an older punk came up to us, someone we had never seen before. A straggly Fagin-like character, wearing a black motorcycle jacket with a large anarchist's circled capital A logo painted in white on the back, tartan bondage trousers, white brothel creepers, and a ripped white T-shirt that simply said in garish, dripping blood red, "The Punk Duff Experience," with the words "censored" written across it in black. Drawing on an embassy, he said to us, "Couldn't help overhearing that, lads." And then, pointing to his T-shirt, "Ever thought of booking the Punk Duff Experience? Proto-punks. They'd pack this place out no problem." Never heard of them, said Stumpy. Where are they from? Luton. They got a big local following there. Look, I'm Mac the Mole. I do a bit of booking for them. They'd go down an absolute storm here, and will definitely pull in the punters for you. The bait had been laid, and I won't go into the intricacies of the deal we then negotiated. But suffice to say, after running it by Tonko, we came to an arrangement with Mac the Mole, and booked the Punk Duff Experience for the next month's show. So, a month later, and it was the early Thursday evening of our punk and new wave night. Stumpy and I were buzzing with excitement, for we had listened in on the Punk Duff Experience's sound check, and they were good, playing a couple of lightning-fast and raucous songs. A bit of swearing, but hey-ho, this was punk. Even Tonko seemed impressed, and Stumpy and I couldn't believe we, or any of our punk crew, had never heard of them. The Punk Duff Experience were a fair bit older than us, and actually looked pretty hardcore, and somewhat imposing with their huge Mohican haircuts, long leather coats, and black leather trousers. We didn't actually get a chance to talk to them, but all we hoped was that they would enable us to pull the punters in, as Mac the Mole had said they would. And when the doors opened, we could not believe our eyes. Whilst we'd done our normal flyers and posters and word-of-mouth promotion to cover Dunstable, the Punk Duff Experience's own crowd had come, in their droves, mainly much older punks than us, a leather-clad and Mohican-haired Luton crowd that, supplemented by the 20 or so who we had managed to pull in ourselves, meant the place was heaving. Dressed in our black jeans, Stranglers T-shirts and Doc Martens, Stumpy with his scrubbing brush hair more spiked up than usual, he and I breathed in the sweet smell of leather, plastic, cigarettes, and triumph. As we headed for the packed bar, though, we were stopped by Tonko. Hey, lads, I don't know how you boys have done it, but this is great. This is one of the biggest crowds we've ever pulled in. But it's soft drinks only tonight for you, boys, and everyone's also going to need to be on their best behaviour. What do you mean? Stumpy asked. Tonko then gestured over his shoulder. See those two stiffs in the suits, and Mrs. Snooty standing at the side? They're from the council. They've come to check up on what goes on. Stumpy and I looked over and saw an overweight and florid-faced, pompous-looking walrus in a grey suit and tie, a tall, brown-suited bloke with horn-rimmed glasses, and an upturned-nosed woman in a dark blue woolen coat and matching pillbox hat. They looked as out of place as we would have been at the Royal Opera House. Oh, and that guy standing near them in the corduroys is from the local press, Tonko continued. So we can't afford to take any chances with the licensing tonight, lads. Hope you understand. But good job again on the crowd. Now, we had no idea as to how Tonko usually circumnavigated such obstacles as the licensing laws with his events. But let's just say things were normally gotten away with. The overall policy was such that no one at the door or bar ever asked your age, and there were sometimes kids who looked about 12 drinking treble whiskies, which of course was of great benefit to both me and Stumpy, as we were both still of comparatively small stature. It was then that Mac the Mole came across to us. All right, lads, told you they'd pull the punters in. Probably helped with all the press they made in today's Luton paper. What press? Said Stumpy. Great publicity. Take a look. And from inside his leather jacket, he took out a front page that had been folded and creased over about 8 times, unfolded it, and handed it to us. Stumpy and I started to read it, our incredulity and horror growing at the glaring and lurid headline and the lines beneath it. Local punk band banned. Outrageous behaviour at Luton concert. Obscenity and near nudity. Affront to public decency enrages local council. Just as we had read the headlines and again looked across at the 3 councillors, The hall lights were cut, and we knew it was too late. The crowd bayed and roared. Mac the Mole grabbed the press cutting back from us and started piling his way to the front. And Stumpy and I stood gobsmacked, our eyeballs almost popping out as the Punk Duff Experience took to the stage. Val Vixen, the lead singer, with her sculpted, spiked blonde Mohican hair, wearing nothing but thigh-length leather boots and an eye-popping skimpy leather outfit that left very little to the imagination. The lead guitarist, Dave the Destroyer, shirtless in black leather bondage trousers, the same outfit as the drummer Varg, and Gretchen Garb, the bass player, wearing the same get-up as Val Vixen. And then Val grabbed the mic and shrieked, "Evening, Dunstable! Are you ready for the Punk Duff Experience? This one's a new one, called..." Now, I will not repeat the title of this particular song, but I will say it contained a foul expletive followed by the words, "The Council." And the band then ripped into a 3-minute ear-splitting tirade against local councils and politicians that contained more swear words than Stumpy and I had ever heard in our lives. Val Vixen, Dave the Destroyer and Gretchen Garb simulating on stage exactly what that expletive in the song title meant that they would like to do to individual members of Luton Borough Council. The crowd went wild. We had never seen pogoing like it. People crashing into each other, jumping and spiralling, their Mohicans almost hitting the ceiling, an insane leather and plastic bacchanalia of musical mayhem, like a scene from a Hieronymus Bosch painting. As that first number ended to a roar of applause, Stumpy and I saw the red-faced, horrified and shell-shocked councillors leaving as fast as they could, in horror, bewilderment and even terror, their faces looking as if they had just heard that nuclear war had been declared. As the band ripped into the second song and the crowd again went wild, we somehow had a feeling this event would not last. A feeling confirmed when the forces of authority made their move and members of Her Majesty's Constabulary appeared halfway through the gig to pull the plug on the whole anarchic proceedings. There is a postscript to this story. The press headlines that the Punk Duff Experience made in a Dunstable publication the next week were pretty similar to the garish headlines made in the Luton press. Although the reviewer, to his credit, did say some positive things about the music and that young and youngish people were out enjoying themselves. As for our punk and new wave night, that was the last one we put on, as Stumpy and I, although our Dunstable punk credibility had risen significantly as a result of the gig, felt it only right and proper that we should accept the responsibility and not let Tonko take the blame for the fiasco. We duly took our responsibilities as sacrificial lambs, and after intense discussions and agreements with the local council, Tonko was able to keep his middle-of-the-road, funk and rock nights, and also added a prog rock night to replace our punk and new wave night. Thank you for listening to this episode of Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories. And please don't forget to check out the other stories from Series 2 and Series 1. You can also follow Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories on Facebook, where you can keep up to date with all the news about live shows and other Stumpy events. There's also the website, www.stumpysanderson.co.uk, and the Stumpy Sanderson's 1970s Stories YouTube channel. And you can get in touch with me at andrew@stumpysanderson.co.uk. Until the next story, au revoir et bon nuit, and keep grooving.
Yeah. This podcast has been recorded using a DIY punk rock philosophy. Yeah.